As Swallow extends his hand to take the food, he senses an evil mana. Pissed, he boldly asks the bishop what he is trying to do, and while asking this, he smacks the food away. Noticing something disorganized, Swallow believes there's definitely someone behind all this. Meanwhile, Asura shows suspicions that the enemies might be using the flow of mana and uses her mana detection spell. The bishop walks towards the mountain of corpses, surrounded by the eerie cawing of crows under a blood-red evening sky. He stops and, bending down, puts his hands on the ground. In a flash, he reveals his true scary form. He is Malevolent Dungeon's gatekeeper, Lich Simon Magus. Magus gazes up at the sky, surrounded by a swarm of crows against a dark, ominous backdrop. Amongst the crows, a dark face with glowing eyes appears. Noting that Magus has arrived, Magus bows down, hailing and addressing the face as Lord Erebos. Magus says he is there to report to Lord Erebos, and Erebos claims he won't forget Magus's hardship. Erebos gives Magus permission to speak. Magus informs Erebos of an unexpected intruder, and Erebos, having received the same report from Ummel, asks if the intruder was wearing armor. But Magus denies that the intruder he encountered wore any armor, noting only a connection to deep darkness. Erebos considers this information. Magus questions if Erebos has any guess who the intruder could be, but Erebos has no idea. Lord Erebos points out that it's vital for them to occupy Harston to take over the Empire and warns Magus to always be cautious. Magus claims he is deeply ashamed of his inability to carry out the tasks entrusted to him. Lord Erebos mentions that Ummel requested reinforcement at the Lord's castle and asks Magus if he needs reinforcement as well. Magus responds he doesn't need any at the moment and will notify Erebos if he does. Erebos says that's fine and disappears. Magus is confident that soon the dead will rule over the earth and believes no one will be able to stop them as he polymorphs back into a human. Meanwhile, back at Harston, Asura has detected mana all around and Swallow asks her if she can find who cast that magic. Asura says she can't be sure but points out that for such a large-scale magic like this, a method that maintains continuous mana flow is needed. Swallow assumes the caster must be nearby for this, and Asura says they can also use a medium to steadily direct their mana. Swallow notes that a medium for magic on the scale to encompass all of Harston would demand a vast amount of mana. Asura speculates that the caster must have hidden the medium underground and gestures ahead. She points towards the Lord's castle, deeming it highly suspicious. Also, she notes out that it's all just speculation, while Swallow yawns in tiredness. Swallow informs Asura that Patrick is at the Lord's castle and asks if she's free, to which she says yes. Swallow then tells her to go to the castle with him, hearing which Asura gives a startled look. Swallow grins and says it's time to replace one of the malevolent dungeons. In the Lord's castle, Patrick is looking down at the underground dungeon as he finds it suspicious. He has been smelling rotten corpses from the dungeon for some time, so he is investigating it. As Patrick moves forward, now he can even hear a strange noise. Once he is further inside, he comes across a huge monster chopping flesh with a massive cleaver. Patrick claims he hasn't seen a cleaver in a long time. He apologizes to the monster for interrupting and asks who its master is. Alarmed, the monster turns around and swings the cleaver at Patrick. Patrick reacts quickly and effortlessly grabs the cleaver, pointing out that such an attack would never land on him. The monster uses both hands and applies full force to take back the cleaver but isn't able to. Patrick declares it's not right for the monster to be in the castle dungeon and shatters the cleaver with a single touch, questioning if the castle's lord and the hooded man are allied. He asserts that he no longer needs to act in secrecy now that he's confirmed, gripping the monster's jaw firmly in his hand. Telling it to get lost, Patrick slices the monster in two. He exclaims that it's dirty when suddenly something surprise attacks him from behind. The blow sends Patrick's helmet flying away as he turns around surprised. He sees a strange creature with no body but armor, whom he identifies as a Dullahan. Patrick calls out to the Dullahan. He asks on whose orders the Dullahan is guarding the place, but the Dullahan doesn't answer. Suddenly, the Dullahan swipes his sword at Patrick, which Patrick blocks with his arm's armor. Patrick notices the Dullahan is holding the evil sword which can corrode the opponent's weapon. Patrick also notes that the Dullahan is strong, unlike a typical Dullahan. As the Dullahan launches another attack, Patrick asks him they can talk it out. But the Dullahan doesn't want peace. Patrick dodges his attack and thinks he needs to find out why the Dullahan is there. He believes the lord of the palace must have the answers. Patrick then places his hands on the ground and uses low-class magic, the glide panel, turning the ground slippery, causing the Dullahan to lose balance. Patrick grabs the half-remaining sword as the Dullahan prepares to attack again. In a flash, Patrick lunges towards the Dullahan and strikes him. Patrick acknowledges that since the Dullahan doesn't want to talk, he decides to end the fight quickly. He is holding the extra sword he took from the Dullahan. As a bright flash of light illuminates the dungeon, Patrick easily slices the Dullahan in half. Meanwhile, inside the castle, Lord Lyricinevire wakes up in her bed, feeling cold. A voice asks her if she slept well, and looking up, she sees Patrick standing there. Lyricinevire shouts, demanding to know how Patrick dares to trespass in the middle of the night, to which he calmly states he has business with her. He holds the sword pointed at Lara and gives her 5 minutes to summon the hooded man who was with her earlier. After a while, once the man is summoned, Patrick apologizes for disturbing them and says he picked up something on his night walk. Saying this, he throws the helmet down on the floor. Startled, Lyricinevire asks what the thing is, and Patrick explains it's the helm of a Dullahan. He asks Lyricinevire why she is working with an undead. The man under the hood responds and asks Patrick what he is talking about. Patrick questions Lyricinevire if she really doesn't know what is going on in her land or if she is acting to not know. The man suggests Lyricinevire not to listen to Patrick's nonsense and kick him out, while Patrick claims he killed the Dullahan in the basement. Lyricinevire is shocked to hear this. Patrick informs Lyricinevire of the piles of corpses in the basement, then points his sword at the man, revealing him to be undead as well. However, Lyricinevire refuses to believe Patrick's claims. She points out that the man promised her the salvation of Harston. She gets enraged at Patrick for falsely accusing that man of being an undead. Patrick asks Lyricinevire if she knows who is threatening the safety of Harston. The man in the hood tells both of them to calm down and claims that Dullahans aren't that easy to come across. Patrick agrees and says he was also surprised seeing the Dullahan in the dungeon. That Dullahan was really weird as it didn't even respond to Patrick, despite Dullahans having intelligence. Not just that, but the way it moved during the battle with Patrick wasn't normal, so Patrick investigated after burning up its soul. Patrick points out that he found a mind control magic circle engraved in the Dullahan's armor alongside the name of the owner. The name of the Dullahan is Masham, which is the name of the vice-captain of the raid force that was gathered to raid a brutal undead 30 years ago. It was said that he was really strong, but he disappeared after the raid. Patrick asks Lyricinevire if she knows who the brutal undead that Masham had tried to raid was, but she doesn't seem to know. Patrick says he will ask differently and points his sword at the man, telling him to answer honestly. He puts the sword near the man's throat and asks him where the brutal undead Arivos the miser undead underling is. Lyricinevire is shocked hearing the name Arivos. With a puzzled look, she asks Patrick why he is speaking the name of a boss of an evil dungeon. Suddenly, the room fills with the booming laugh of the man. He continues laughing, seeing which Lyricinevire is taken aback. Lyricinevire bellows at the man, reminding him of his promise to save Harston. The man grins evilly and admits his promise, startling Lyricinevire. He points out that the plan can be changed and admits that a peaceful resolution is out of the question. The man begins to raise his hand, but Patrick cleanly cuts it off with his blade. Patrick then warns the man and Lyricinevire to stay still. The man stares at his cut-off arm through which no blood flows, and Lyricinevire realizes he is an undead. The man says he is Uhumel. He then says he will kill Lyricinevire and everyone else around, turning it into a land of the dead. Lyricenevire's face is full of terror as Uhumel claims it's all part of the plan of the Lord of the Undead, immortal King Arivos. Patrick expresses surprise and asks if undead typically rely on numbers in combat. He points out that he never expected such an organized and well-thought-out plan. Uhumel admits he did take an interest in Patrick and congratulates him for suppressing his expectations by killing Masham. Patrick says it's his first time being praised by someone for killing their underling. Uhumel growls that he is curious about Patrick and asks him why he isn't serving Lord Arivos, being an undead. Hearing Patrick is an undead, Lyricinevire is even more shocked. Patrick realizes his cover is blown and expresses he doesn't want to kill Lyricinevire. With all this, Patrick begins to feel his mood turning sour, and without a second thought, he cuts off another of Uhumel's arms. Patrick then points his sword at Uhumel's throat and tells him to do as asked. But Uhumel says threats don't work on him, and Patrick reminds him he has a lot to lose. Patrick warns Uhumel about Swallow, telling him Swallow is really stronger. He claims that if Swallow wants, he can ruin Uhumel's plan easily. With that, Patrick suggests Uhumel not waste time and explain everything. He also instructs Uhumel to tell him about what his boss Arivos is up to. Uhumel snarls and agrees to give Patrick an answer, asking if he knows how an elder comes to be. Annoyed, Patrick warns Uhumel to stop asking and just answer. Uhumel explains that for a normal human or an elf to be an elder, a super rare supernatural phenomenon or a large amount of surpassing hatred is required. The reason why they are called elders is that each each of them has the power to fight 1,000 zombies by themselves, and Lord Arivos can easily make such elders. Hearing this, Patrick realizes it must be the reason for isolating Harston and creating a religion. Uhumal reveals their main plan is to make an elder by doing all this. He adds that Harston is a perfect place for all undead to gather, and the reason for starving people is to weaken their resolve. Patrick points out that he understands and asks why there is a mountain of corpses, to which Uhumal says it's to create even more elders. Uhumal reveals their plan to destroy the Empire. Patrick believes that if the Empire is destroyed and all humans are turned to undead, Lord Arivos would then target the 7 great evil dungeons. Suddenly, Uhumal begins to mutter spells and summons dark, strange circular symbols around him. Laracinavire is frozen with fear. Uhumal says he can cast spells even without hands, as many shadowy arms start enclosing around Patrick. Uhumal claims he would never reveal the truth and says there exists no being that can go against Lord Arivos. He also points out that the only one who can go against Lord Arivos is the ancient monster who has been in slumber for many years. Saying this, Uhumal prepares to attack Patrick, creating a glowing circular energy ball. Patrick, hearing Uhumal's talk, says he wants to ask a question as he forces the shadowy hands off his body. Seeing Patrick break through his bindings, Uhumal is bewildered. Patrick says he understands all Uhumal has said and takes his helm off and drops it. His eyes glowing bright blue, he asks if the ancient monster actually appears, would Arivos' plans be all ruined? Uhumal bellows out, deeming Patrick's threats nonsense. Suddenly, something pierces Uhumal from behind, taking him by surprise. A huge explosion inside the castle sends smoke and dust bellowing into the sky. Patrick stares ahead and sees Lord Swallow has arrived and claims it was such perfect timing. As dust fills the room, Laracinavire covers her mouth, startled by a sudden shriek from someone who hit their head. Adjura, who seems to have fallen down, complains that the building is too brittle. Patrick looks down at Adjura and compliments her timing. Swallow asks Patrick what he has discovered, to which Patrick replies that he has found out everything. Swallow notices Laracinavire, who looks terrified. He then raises his head and looks up, only to see an attack of massive dark mana flying towards him. The attack hits Swallow and causes a small explosion where he was sitting. Swallow's anger rises, and his body turns dark and intimidating. He sends dark spikes towards Uhumal, piercing his body in multiple places. Uhumal recognizes the aura of the power and is bewildered. Patrick reminds Uhumal that he did mention his companion was much stronger. Uhumal is still shocked as he realizes the ancient monster is free and walking. Lost for words, Uhumal realizes he couldn't even feel the energy of the crystal upstairs. He looks over at Adjura and senses her energy, recognizing that she is a demon king. Uhumal decides he should stall longer and inform all this to Lord Arivos, so he asks Swallow why he has come there, coughing and claiming he is sure Swallow had gone into hiding. But before he can continue, a blinding flash of light fills the room, causing a large explosion that blows off the remaining top of the castle. As the dust clears, Uhumal is laying face down, coughing. He tells Swallow and the others that they are already too late. Annoyed, Adjura sends a bolt of lightning at Uhumal, reprimanding him for talking too much. Swallow gives a huge yawn and points out that Uhumal is still not dead. Uhumal, now his whole body emitting a massive amount of mana, says his lord has descended upon the land, demanding worship. Patrick tries to interject, but Swallow claims he can see it as well. Patrick sighs and remarks that someone is certainly making a grand entrance. Meanwhile, elsewhere, people notice that the sky is looking peculiar, and with curiosity, they all stare up. The sky is dark, full of strange clouds. Rosalina seems in a hurry as she sprints, huffing and panting. Suddenly, a voice calls her name, causing her to stop. She sees Toth standing there, asking her where she has been. Rosalina replies that she went for a walk to clear her head at Jarbet Plaza. She quickly clasps her mouth, realizing she mentioned the name of the place where no one is allowed to go. Worried that Toth will scold her, she apologizes, but Toth instead laughs. Rosalina is surprised to see that Toth isn't mad at her. Toth informs Rosalina that their captain and others have decided to leave Harston the next day. He says the captain doesn't trust those 2 knights and tells Rosalina to follow him as he explains on the way. Rosalina and Toth head to the mountain of corpses where Rosalina's parents are buried. Toth reminds Rosalina that they won't be able to come back to this place for long once they leave Harston. He offers Rosalina a choice to do as she wishes. Rosalina says she doesn't understand why the captain wants to leave, as she is confident Harston will be saved. Toth points out that, despite Rosalina being in the religion, waiting for salvation is pointless when it will never come. He explains that it's not only gods who can grant salvation, but our choices can bring salvation. Rosalina mutters if her actions can really bring salvation. Turning towards Toth, she acknowledges that he is right. Toth hands over the flame to Rosalina and asks if she can do it, to which she affirms. Holding the flames, Rosalina extends her hand to burn the corpses. However, someone's hand grabs Rosalina's arm, stopping her from torching the corpses. Taken aback, Toth asks who the stranger is. Rosalina turns sideways and sees that it's the bishop. Rosalina is shocked to see the bishop there, though she doesn't know he is Magus, an undead. Magus tightens his grip on Rosalina's arm, making her ask what he is doing. The flame Rosalina is holding begins to burn Magus's arm, while Thoth tells him to let go of Rosalina. Thoth smells burning flesh as Magus's arm ignites, and Rosalina tells him to put out the fire. Suddenly, Thoth pulls Rosalina back, freeing her from Magus's grasp. Thoth falls backward, groaning while still holding onto Rosalina. Looking bewildered, Thoth stares at Magus, whose whole body is now engulfed in flames. Finally, Magus reveals his true, terrifying form. Thoth finally realizes the bishop is an undead, while Rosalina remains puzzled. Magus snaps at them to remain silent, claiming someone is about to descend. Both Thoth and Rosalina are speechless in fear as the corpses suddenly begin to move. Snarling and groaning, all the corpses come to life, horrifying Rosalina. Magus seems to have reanimated the dead and turned them into undead with his mana. Unable to believe what he's seeing, Thoth shouts at Rosalina to get up and run. So, filled with adrenaline, Rosalina and Thoth sprint away as the undead chase them. After running for long, they enter a house, huffing and puffing, as Thoth barricades the door with chairs and a sofa. Exhausted, Rosalina slumps on the floor, claiming she can't move anymore. Thoth reminds her they have no choice and suggests they move to the second floor, as the first floor is still unsafe. Since Rosalina can't move, Thoth tells her to get on his back. Carrying Rosalina, Thoth walks up the stairs, sweating from exhaustion. Meanwhile, outside, the undead have surrounded the house. Thoth is concerned, unsure if both he and Rosalina will survive. Rosalina asks Thoth if the place smells horrible because of that, pointing at it. Thoth sees what Rosalina is pointing to, a corpse lying dead inside a room. He then puts Rosalina down as she asks if they are safe, which he denies. He warns Rosalina they are still in danger and tells her to stay focused if she wants to live. Thoth notices the corpse is holding a weapon in its hand. Removing his coat, Thoth's expression turns serious as he picks up the weapon, causing Rosalina to be terrified. Thoth's expression remains intense as he swipes the weapon at Rosalina, who shrieks and closes her eyes. As Rosalina opens her eyes, she sees Thoth kneeling in front of her, having cut the bishop's symbol from her neck. Thoth tells Rosalina to believe in something believable from now on. At that moment, a loud noise fills the house, startling them both. Thoth realizes the undead must have pushed the door open and forced their way inside. Standing up, Thoth turns away from Rosalina. Confused, Rosalina calls out to Thoth asking where he's going. Thoth exits the room and, turning to Rosalina, gives a warm smile. Concerned, Rosalina tells Thoth to wait, stands and tries to run towards him. However, Thoth slams the door shut and locks it from the outside with a blood-dabbed cloth, hoping the undead won't smell Rosalina inside. Meanwhile, Rosalina screams and begs Thoth not to leave her alone as the undead begin climbing the stairs. Thoth warns Rosalina to not make a noise, no matter what she hears. He also tells her no to move without thinking as Rosalina puts a hand over her mouth. Thoth praises Rosalina for listening to him. The undead finally reach the second floor, growling and snarling as they go after Thoth. Thoth grips the weapon tightly and prepares to confront the undead, apologizing to Rosalina for always picking on her. Inside, Rosalina is in tears but doesn't dare cry out loud. The sky is red at dusk, with glowing streetlights illuminating the buildings. The undead are growling, and Thoth's weapon has been snapped in half, with blood scattered around. The glass windows of the houses are shattered as Magus hovers above his armies of undead. He snarls at the undead, gathering their attention, and with his hand raised, he commands them to attack. Noticing the eerie red sky, the remaining villagers of Harston are heading towards the Lord's castle, suspecting she might be responsible for it. As they see the castle in flames, they are convinced that the heavens must be angry. At that moment, a loud scream causes the villagers to turn around in alarm. They notice someone standing nearby, all wondering who it might be. Thoth, covered in blood, shrieks that it's dangerous. A man steps forward, offering to take a look at Toth's wounds. He mentions he was a trainee at the Magic Tower's Wind Guild. Toth mutters undead while the magician discovers Toth hasn't got any wounds despite the blood covering him. He wonders whose blood it might be as the undead close in on them. One of the villagers turns around and comments that more people seem to be heading towards them. Toth suddenly grabs the magician's hand and bellows that the undead are coming. The villagers are alarmed as they notice an undead standing right nearby. The undead snarls, baring its teeth, and lunges at a person nearby. Out of nowhere, a knight comes galloping on a horse and severs the undead's head clean off. The knight informs the villagers that the undead aren't that strong. He gives them the choice to either run or fight together. All the villagers agree to fight. The knight notices the magicians, who explain that they were on assignment during the Black Disaster and managed to survive. One man raises his hand, saying he will fight, and following him, all the villagers do the same. The knight responds that it's good. He then rallies the villagers to defend and fight against the undead, urging those who can wield weapons to the front lines and others to set up a perimeter defense. Moments later, the undead close in, growling and snapping their teeth. The knight instructs the magicians to ready their magic, and they fire massive bolts of lightning straight at the undead. Meanwhile, the captain feels the massive explosion nearby and wonders what must be going on. He seems worried, wondering where Toth and Rosalina might be. To his surprise, he sees Rosalina slumped against a wall nearby, seemingly passed out. Calling out her name, the captain approaches her, and Rosalina opens her eyes as he asks what happened to her. Rosalina explains that Toth told her to stay put, and she came all the way out here because she was frightened. She begins to sob, and the captain realizes the truth, asking Rosalina if Toth resented her when he died. However, he himself states Toth would never do that and reminds Rosalina that she is alive because of Toth. Rosalina says those undead weren't normal. Confused, the captain asks what she means. Rosalina asserts they need the help of Sir Knight, referring to Patrick. The captain notes that Patrick is probably in the Lord's castle. He then pulls out a potion of strength and gives it to Rosalina. Getting up, he points out that he is the captain and can't just leave his comrades to fight alone. He then walks away, telling Rosalina to go and bring those Patrick and Swallow. Meanwhile, in the castle, Patrick looks out of the window, noting the chaos outside, and Asura comments on the people's struggles. Swallow, lying down, claims it's nothing to do with them, but Patrick retorts that it's everything to do with them. Patrick notes that the humans seem to have the advantage at the moment as Swallow asks how long the humans will last. Patrick believes they won't last long, as soon they will tire out and get overrun by the thousands of undead. Additionally, Patrick mentions that among the undead, there might be an elder mixed in. Patrick suggests that Arivos seems to have put a lot of effort into his plan and thinks they should also start repaying the favor. Swallow smirks and agrees to repay the favor but insists they need to do something before that. Patrick asks Swallow what he is planning to do as Swallow gets on his feet. Laracinavire, looking terrified, is approached by Swallow, who asks her name. Still scared, Laracinavire stammers her name. Swallow kneels nearby her and introduces himself. He then gently lifts Laracinavare's chin and asks her if she wants to live. Swallow lifts Laracinavare's chin and introducing himself, asks if she wants to live. Patrick reminds Swallow they need to kill Laracinavire, not save her. Swallow says he has changed his mind, but Patrick insists Harston is already past the point of no return. Swallow asks if they are really giving up on Harston because of the undead, which Patrick confirms. Swallow suggests that if all the undead disappeared from Harston and they made Laracinavire follow their commands, it would be worth it. Patrick considers the suggestion, thinking it might not be a bad idea. Asura points out that the humans who have learned the truth will not stay quiet, but Swallow believes not all are like that. He believes Laracinavire has a reason to live as she looks brave, not fearing Swallow even after seeing his true form. Swallow thinks Laracinavire has something special about her. All the heroes Swallow encountered earlier had something special about them, and he believes Laracinavire has extraordinary mental capacity to stay sane even after seeing him. Laracinavire agrees that she has a reason to live. Swallow points out that a human like Laracinavire wouldn't go out of their way to die, as Patrick asks if that's the only thing he's going off of. Swallow adds that he also has his gut feelings. Patrick points out that he can't say much since Swallow is adamant about it. Patrick reminds Swallow that he has to take care of the aftermath if things go wrong. Swallow tells Laracinavire that everything will be done if she says, "Please save us," prompting her to inquire about the aftermath. Swallow explains that the undead will be chased away from Harston with Patrick's help. Patrick bellows at Swallow, asking if he is trying to sell him off. Laracinavire bows to Swallow and asks what she needs to do in return. Swallow tells her she must give up everything she has to him. Seeing Laracinavire puzzled, Swallow makes it clear that she will have to offer everything to his team. Laracinavire becomes speechless, knowing that if she declines, she will definitely die. If she accepts, she will live but lose everything. She wonders if her brother hadn't died, would all this have happened? Would she ever be in this position? As she remains silent, Patrick suggests they just put Laracinavire to death. At that moment, someone with bloody feet comes rushing into the castle, which Patrick senses and informs the others. Adra asks if she should block the door with magic, but Swallow tells her to just open it. Adra does as asked, and as she opens the door, Rosalina comes running in. Rosalina seems happy to see Swallow and requests his help. She stops near Swallow, panting, and informs him the village is overrun by the undead and begs for his help. She also explains that Toth has died and the captain and others are waiting for help, trying to hold on. Once again, she requests Swallow's help. Her eyes travel to Patrick, and she realizes he is actually a skeleton, shrieking in shock while Swallow points to Laracinavire, saying she is in charge. Rosalina turns towards Laracinavire as Laracinavire asks if the people of Harston are dying. Patrick notes that the humans must have reached their limits and asks Adra for a favor. Adra produces a circular rune and summons a huge eye with wings, ordering it to go off track and go directly. The eye monster flies above Harston, acting like a broadcast camera, and Adra produces a screen to see everything the eye monster is seeing. All of them see that the undead have overrun and are killing every human in sight. Seeing this, both Laracinavire and Rosalina are distressed. There are even ghouls among the undead, and Patrick assumes the humans won't live for much longer. Rosalina is on the verge of tears as she remembers her people who are now being torn apart by the undead, all screaming in pain. Her face saddens, and tears leak out seeing all this. She calls out Swallow and Patrick for just staying idle and not doing anything, begging them to save her and her people. Filled with rage, Rosalina turns to Laracinavire and asks what she was doing while people were dying one by one. Rosalina screams, demanding answers from Laracinavire. Sounding desperate, Laracinavire turns to Swallow and requests him to save them. She also begins to cry as she earnestly begs Swallow to save the remaining ones in Harston. Swallow finally decides to help as he, Patrick, and Adra begin to walk out. Swallow claims it's not too difficult of a task, and the three of them make their way to confront the undead. The battle with the undead is ongoing as an old man gets slammed down to the ground. He is badly hurt and realizes the undead aren't weak. He is still unable to believe that humans fell so easily against the undead. As one undead lunges at the man, he thinks it's the end of him. However, Adra intervenes in time, kicking the undead into the ground, calling it nasty. Adra's boots get drenched in blood as she wishes she had landed on the roof. The other undead growl and sprint towards Adra, who finds them too loud. She uses her mana and fires spells at the undead, causing them to be engulfed in flames. She looks proud after finishing all of the undead in just a single go. The old man, in awe, calls Adra an angel. This pisses off Adra, and in rage, she kicks the man in his guts. Adra tells the man to get lost if he values his life as he gets sent flying backward. The man then gets up and sprints away while Adra calls after him, asking how he dared compare her to an angel. Adra shows that she does not like helping humans. At that moment, Magus arrives and learns that Adra isn't human but a demon. Sensing her immense mana, he deduces she is a demon king. He then asks Adra why she is siding with humans. Adra responds that she will do as she pleases. Magus snarls that he will find out the truth after ripping flesh off Adra. Saying this, he suggests Adra throw her humanity and become undead as well. Looking irritated, Adra points out that Magus is really talkative. Magus raises his arm and claims he is serving the commander of the undead, the darkness of the 10 evils. He asserts that he will never lose to someone like Adra as he uses his mana and summons a few minions. Adra points out that she is not sure what Magus is talking about and reminds him she will not be the one to face him. Looking puzzled, Magus turns sideways to see the intimidating and scary eyes of Swallow looking down at him. Swallow says he finally found Magus and reminds him he had told him he would make sure to remember him. Saying this, Swallow pulls back a punch and smacks it onto Magus's face. The punch sends Magus smashing into the wall. Swallow grins, saying that landing the punch wasn't a bad feeling. He looks down at Magus sprawled on the ground and believes he must be the gatekeeper of the undead army as well as the 7 great dungeons. Swallow then tells Magus to get up quickly quickly, assuming he shouldn't be dead so easily. Asura asks Swallow if he has any grudge against Mangas. Swallow claims that he just doesn't like Mangas and wants to hit him more. He also says it will be no good staying there and asks Asura if she thinks Arivos is in the village. Asura thinks not and points to the sky at a barrier made to trap everyone in the village. She believes the caster must be outside the barrier and says she can't break it. Swallow then instructs Asura to take care of the remaining undead. He points out that it will be good to minimize any more loss of humans, and Asura agrees to do it. Swallow says he will go and have a one-on-one with Arivos. At this very moment, more undead are arriving. As Swallow turns to leave, Asura asks how long he will take, to which he says 15 to 20 minutes. Looking happy, Asura claims she will be able to hold just fine if it's only 20 minutes, and she wishes Swallow a safe trip. Swallow walks towards Mangas, who asks if he is really the ancient monster. Swallow says Mangas is partially right, causing Mangas to ask who he is. Swallow says he is Patrick's slave, which Mangas deems nonsense. Suddenly, Mangas summons a massive circular rune and says he wasn't foolishly waiting there without preparing anything. He pushes Swallow backward with his attack, saying he is one of the pillars of Lord Arivos' forces who has never disappointed him. Saying this, he summons massive bolts of lightning which strike everywhere around the area. Mangas then gets on his feet and, huffing, thinks he should take this chance and get to Lord Arivos. However, he receives a shock as he sees Lord Swallow on his feet, looking furious. Mangas curses in worry as he learns that Swallow is really the ancient monster of the malevolent dungeons. He knows that it's very dangerous, so he turns around and sprints away, hoping to reach Lord Arivos. He puts full effort into escaping, not realizing Swallow's massive jaws are closing in on him from behind. Once Mangas is inside his mouth, Swallow shuts his jaws, but he realizes Mangas has managed to escape. Mangas summons a portal and disappears through it, leaving Swallow to realize he attempted to devour Mangas in one bite but failed. Swallow knows it will be annoying to spend time finding Mangas, but he can't just let him get away. He then remembers he had promised Asura to be back in just 20 minutes. He looks down at where Asura is fighting and expresses concern for her but knows he can't waste any more time there. He raises his hand, preparing an attack, thinking that Mangas must have fled to his mother and Arivos is likely outside the village. Meanwhile, Mangas appears out of a wall nearby, and sensing something, he turns back. A massive bright laser-like attack comes hurling towards Mangas. The powerful attack was launched by Swallow with the intention to blow everything on the way to catch Mangas off guard. Swallow's attack causes the whole path straight ahead of him to blow off, causing a massive trench. As Swallow walks along the trench, he feels like he can even hear Patrick's voice. A little ahead, Swallow comes across the dead corpse of Mangas. He then grabs onto the corpse and drags it along as he moves forward. When he reaches the end of the village, he sees the barrier. Swallow acknowledges the barrier's toughness as even Asura's strength can't break it. Impressed with the barrier, Swallow extends his arm to examine it. He is startled seeing his arm get severely damaged upon passing it through the barrier. Swallow thinks it's impressive, despite his hand now being destroyed. He believes he can get through the barrier and hopes the bracelet he has will hold out. Moreover, Swallow fears the scolding he will get from Patrick if the bracelet gets destroyed. He gives a grin, planning to blame the corpse of Mangas if anything goes wrong. Swallow looks sideways and notes that there aren't humans in that area. With that, he turns back and walks a few paces away from the barrier. He then transforms into his monstrous form with all the tentacles and scary face. After that, he sprints forward straight at the barrier. Suddenly a deafening outburst shakes the whole village. Swallow has successfully managed to tear apart the barrier and left the village. Meanwhile, the undead who were outside the village all get alerted and turn around. Upon arriving, Swallow notices that they have surrounded him and remarks on the overwhelming number of undead present. The undead grumble and grunt, lunging straight for Swallow with their hands extended toward him. Swallow summons a huge amount of mana and incinerates any undead nearby him. At that moment, a group of undead elders advance and encircle Swallow. An elder with many arms summons a sword and pierces it into the ground. With this, countless more undead soldiers arrive at the site from all directions. Swallow stands alone, facing the elders, and admits he should have acted decisively from the beginning. From the darkness, two enormous glowing eyes appear as Swallow extends his arm, presenting the bracelet as a gift. The one with the glowing eyes steps forward as Swallow mentions they have a lot to discuss, referring to Arivos who has just revealed himself. Lord Erivos finally makes an appearance. He asks Swallow if he is saying it's okay for the undead to be suppressed by humans. Swallow doesn't respond. Erivos reminds Swallow that humans are selfish and have always wanted more, invading the lands of other races. Swallow irritably tells Erivos to get to the point. Erivos says he wants humans to disappear and points out that Swallow has the power to easily rid of the Empire. He claims he thought taking down the Empire would be impossible without bringing down Reyes until he heard Reyes was struck by the Black Disaster. Erivos points out that if Swallow had desired to wipe out the humans, every demon would have supported him. Swallow, even more bored, tells Erivos to talk less and get to the main point. Erivos snarls that if Swallow hadn't been so hands-off, so many demons wouldn't have died. He claims that with Swallow's help, they would have wiped out every human. Swallow considers this and asks Erivos if he is blaming him for all this. Erivos affirms and says Swallow is the root cause, which Swallow instantly denies. Swallow asks Erivos if he wants him to get out of his way. Erivos remarks that Swallow is disappointing. Suddenly, a massive circular rune appears right above Swallow. From the rune, a paw of a creature is visible, causing Swallow to be puzzled. A second later, a huge monster resembling a cross between a bull and a wild boar descends. Swallow reacts quickly as he pulls the bracelet off his hand. The monster lands on the ground, causing the ground to crumble. Meanwhile, back in Harston, Asura is busy battling the undead, realizing there are too many. With a bored look, she raises her weapon and sends an attack at the undead. Followed by a bright flash of light, all the undead get burned to a crisp. Asura thinks she should move quickly as the undead are all spread out. She stares at the barrier in the sky, noting it's close to God-class magic, as expected of Swallow. She also recalls Swallow mentioning he would have a quick one-on-one with Erivos, but only 3 minutes have passed since then. At that moment, someone huffing appears behind Asura. It's the captain, who looks injured as he asks if everyone is safe. Asura replies that the other humans are burning in the fire, pointing to it. The captain, who is having difficulty opening his eyes, asks Asura if she is a companion of the knights. Seeing Asura confused, the captain explains that he refers to the knights in giant suits of armor and the one dressed like a beggar. Asura claims that she is not a companion but just a servant of the knights. The captain, meanwhile, hopes that Rosalina has found the knights by now. He is also relieved that Toth didn't die in vain and that Harston will be saved. Deeply wounded, the captain tells Asura that he will soon turn into an undead. Asura responds that she knows, and the captain asks if he can request a favor. He is startled as he sees Asura's true form, realizing she isn't a human, but that doesn't matter to him, and so he requests Asura to hand him any weapon that's lying around. Asura remains silent and analyzes the captain, then brings a spear. She hands the spear to the captain, reminding him that he is a warrior, and he takes it firmly. Sometime later, Asura notices an ominous aura emanating from the nearby forest as she flies above Harston. The massive aura even uproots the trees of the forest with ease. The monster that appeared from the rune charges at Swallow. Swallow finds the monster weird as he sends it flying backward. Lord Erivos claims it's as he expected, noting that such strength is befitting of the title Ancient Monster of Swallow. Erivos explains that the thing he summoned is an undead with an ancient slime at its core. Swallow, who is taken aback, turns around sensing something. Erivos seems to have used a god-class magic to summon massive fangs of evil right above Swallow. Erivos claims that it's the strongest god-class magic that not even Swallow can withstand. Saying this, he sends the fangs straight down at Swallow, telling him to be in awe. The thousands of undead watch as the fangs of evil pierce down upon Swallow's body. Swallow is rooted to the spot while Erivos shrieks that he will finally kill the ancient monster. He bellows out that he will fill the land with undead and become a ruler over the dead. He summons more fangs of evil, telling Swallow to feel blessed to die after wandering for thousands of years. The fangs of evil rain down upon Swallow, who suddenly reacts in defense. A massive explosion illuminates the night sky, sending shockwaves far and wide. The remaining fangs of evil all crumble mid-ace as Erivos watches. Swallow shrieks that the fangs of evil hurt and says he won't let Erivos hit him again. Erivos is puzzled, hearing Swallow say he took the attack on purpose. In anger, Erivos blows off a few trees in front of him. Swallow wonders why Erivos is taking his anger out on the trees. He then asks Erivos if the fangs of evil are really the strongest magic he can use and if he has anything stronger. Now Erivos is certain that Swallow let him strike to test the power of the god-class magic. Realizing he doesn't stand a chance, Erivos decides to retreat. Erivos notes that he was too hasty and starts looking for openings to flee. Meanwhile, Swallow moves forward, warning Erivos not to get any weird ideas. Erivos is in a dilemma as Swallow urges him to use any stronger attacks if he has them. Seeing Erivos not respond, Swallow asks why he is silent and confirms that he doesn't have anything stronger. Suddenly, Erevos uses another spell and sends down massive blade-like attacks at Swallow. Swallow sighs as the attacks strike down on him. At that moment, a most powerful streak of light descends upon Swallow, illuminating every undead around. Erevos has cast a powerful spell, binding Swallow's entire body with big and strong chains. Swallow claims he hates these kinds of spells and roars in annoyance. Suddenly, a huge monster, one of those god-class ones, lunges at Swallow while he is chained. Unable to move due to the chains, Swallow is swallowed by the monster. Swallow, now in human form and inside the monster's body, is disgusted with the slimy thing around him. He notes that the monster is too big and decides to get a little serious himself. He transforms again into his monstrous form, bursting out from the monster's body and blowing it apart. The aftermath sends a powerful aura in all directions. Swallow, with his intimidating eyes, stares down at Erevos, who stares back. Swallow returns to his human form, and looking at Erevos, Swallow mentions it's time to replace one of the 7 great evil dungeons. Back in the Lord's castle, Rosalina and Laracinavire look concerned, staring at Patrick, who is sitting with his head in his hands, lost in thought. At that moment, Laracinavire and Rosalina feel a surge of mana coming their way. From the opening, they witnessed a massive explosion, prompting Laracinavire to inquire about what is happening. Patrick explains that it's Swallow making a mess while taking care of the undead army. Looking hopeful, Laracinavire asks if Harston will be saved. Patrick says it's not sure yet and suggests Laracinavire not worry too much. Meanwhile, Asura seems to have killed every one of the remaining undead in the village. She finally returns to the castle and slumps down, saying it was tiring. Laying on her back, she claims it's been a while since she used so much mana. Patrick praises Asura for doing a good job. Asura questions if Swallow is done yet, and Patrick informs her that Swallow is still fighting. Patrick points out that the power released by Swallow is awe-inspiring, and he notes that whenever Swallow intervenes to help, he tends to cause more destruction. Because of this, Patrick claims that he will have a lot of work to do after it's all over. He also wonders why Swallow is dragging out the fight for so long. He then calls out to Rosalina, who turns back. Patrick has his sword out and, as he claims, Laracinavire was only promised to be kept alive, so he wants to finish off Rosalina. Patrick raises his sword at Rosalina, claiming only the Lord of the territory was promised to be kept alive, and decides to kill her. He points out there's no point in keeping anyone unimportant alive. Rosalina falls back in fear while Laracinavire pleads with Patrick to spare Rosalina. Patrick draws himself up to his full height, looking terrifying as he gazes down at the 2 girls. Then, suddenly, Patrick breaks into a smile, claiming he was just joking. He knows Rosalina isn't a threat, having lost everyone close to her, and with her mental state, hurting her serves no purpose. Patrick also worries that killing Rosalina might upset Laracinavire, which would be a loss for him. Patrick calls out to Asura and asks if she can put others to sleep. Asura confirms and asks who she needs to do that to. Patrick says he wants to speak to Laracinavire alone, and Asura understands, casting a spell to make Rosalina fall asleep. Once Rosalina is fast asleep, Patrick suggests they get started now. He reminds Laracinavire that they have completed their part in saving Harston and reminds her of her promise. The first request Patrick makes of Laracinavire is that she can't tell anyone what she has seen so far. He offers to tell Laracinavire a story about a heroic territory lord who took all the insults to protect her land. In the story, the lord realized that the undead were going to overrun her territory and resolved to protect it and its citizens. However, she was in a situation where she didn't have enough soldiers, and the enemies had surrounded her, leaving her no choice but to ask for help. Even before help arrived, people started insulting her because they were dying to undead while waiting for reinforcements. Despite this, the Lord held steadfast until reinforcements from the Empire finally arrived, driving away the undead and saving the territory, which ends the story. Patrick tells Laracinavire that she isn't like the Lord who kept hiding. He claims she is the Lord who sacrificed herself to save her people, prompting Laracinavire to ask if he expects her to lie to her subjects. Patrick points outside the window and reminds Laracinavire that she was the one who said she wants to live. He instructs Laracinavire to distribute all the castle's supplies to the remaining people, promising that help from other cities will arrive soon. Laracinavire questions Patrick about how he can be sure help will arrive, and Patrick assures her that he will ensure assistance comes. He also notes that since it's quiet, Swallow must have finished fighting and suggests they head towards him. Laracinavire, with a question in her mind, asks Patrick why he is going to such lengths to save Harston. She knows that Patrick is a dungeon monster and would never care for other people's lives. Patrick firmly reminds Laracinevire that she herself expressed a desire to live and warns her not to ask any more questions from then on. Meanwhile, Swallow has defeated Arivos and declares it's time to replace one of the 7 great dungeons, expressing sorry for Arivos. Swallow also points out that if Arivos hadn't done what he did, he might have stayed alive. He also expresses annoyance as everyone keeps disturbing him. Arivos admits he is shocked seeing Swallow's strength. Swallow asks Arivos why he decided to invade only Harston, knowing it was his territory. Arivos claims that Harston is the most effective location to invade the Empire from. Hearing this, Swallow realizes that Arivos came to Harston despite knowing it was his territory. Arivos asks Swallow what he thinks the reason might be. Suddenly, Arivos uses a spell and summons a massive circular thing beside him. Swallow reacts quickly and sends sharp stings at Arivos, piercing his body. Despite this, Arivos begins to laugh loudly. The sharp stings piercing Arivos' body begin to glow, and finally, a massive explosion blows Arivos apart. This causes Arivos' head to roll down to Swallow's feet, revealing that Arivos wasn't attempting to use transfer magic. Swallow decides it doesn't matter, as Arivos was going to die anyway, and he reaches down to grab Arivos' head. As he looks around, he is taken aback. He sees the damage done to the place and knows that unless he fixes it, it will be useless. At that moment, he hears someone approaching and, looking back, sees Patrick and Adjura running towards him. Swallow begins to sweat in fear as Patrick shouts at him not to move, saying he will come to him and pointing out that he missed him. Swallow freezes and lets go of the head, realizing he is now in trouble. Rain is pouring in Harston, cascading over the buildings and alleyways. The water fills the puddles and street, reflecting Rosalina's happy memories with the late captain. Rosalina is taking refuge from the rain, grappling with her sorrow. She is grief-stricken, having lost everyone close to her. Now she is the only one remaining. She is sheltering beneath a house as rain pours, rattling the roofs and street. She exclaims that she hates it. She hates everyone, feeling distant from all. She seeks someone to blame, her eyes red with rage, thinking about those who killed everyone. Meanwhile, Renee excitedly welcomes Swallow back in the core of the Ancient. Swallow, displeased, mutters he's back, with Patrick and Adjura behind him. Still excited, Renee says she had been waiting for them all. At that moment, a stalactite falls, and Renee quickly kicks it away, smiling as she says she's cleaned everything. Swallow strokes her hair and praises her, saying she did well. Adjura lies down, claiming she is exhausted, while Patrick and Swallow sit down quietly. Renee asks Swallow if he's really tired. She asks if he wants dinner first or a bath. Patrick notices Renee's changed behavior and asks Elizabeth what she's been teaching her. Elizabeth nervously asks if everything is well, as Swallow tells her she can leave. Patrick explains that around 3,000 humans died, and that Swallow even blew up the whole town. Apart from that, everything went well. Elizabeth asks Swallow what he did there, to which Swallow claims he only cleaned up the undead. Elizabeth questions if he really only cleaned up the undead, and Swallow affirms he cleaned them perfectly. Saying this, Swallow pulls out the head of Arivos and puts it on the table. Elizabeth picks up the head, and she is speechless. While Swallow drinks water, Elizabeth tells him to wait and reveals the head is just a shell. Both Patrick and Renee are shocked to hear this. The night has fallen, and Swallow agrees Arivos did use magic at the end, while Patrick points out that Swallow did a bad job cleaning up. Patrick says that letting Laracinevire live was already questionable, and now even Arivos being alive complicates things further. Swallow points out that Battery said Arivos would have lost at least 70% of his life. Patrick reminds Swallow that the conflict between the Great Evil Dungeons has started and claims they need to be more careful now. Patrick is sure that Arivos won't make a move for a while. He says he will take care of the aftermath in Harston, but points out that accepting monsters into the dungeon depends on Swallow. He then asks Swallow if he is listening, but finds Swallow has fallen asleep and is snoring. Patrick curses in rage. Meanwhile, back in Harston, countless bodies are hung from branches of a massive tree. Rosalina is at the bottom, looking up. Nearby, a group of people are discussing, as one mentions his wife and kids are all dead. That man claims he would rather go to the afterlife than live like this. He turns to Rosalina and tells her she should eat if she is deciding to leave. Rosalina points out that she has nowhere to go and asks why they are suffering when they did nothing wrong. She tells the people to think properly, clenches her teeth, and says it's all unfair. She tells them not to misdirect their hate and reminds them of the futility of meaningless death. She explains that if they're going to die anyway, they should seek revenge and die with pride. The people, filled with motivation from Rosalina's words, ask her what they should do. Rosalina says that they have to kill all the undead. A hero has been summoned in the presence of the king. The king addresses the hero, who kneeling, responds courteously. The king points out that he called Livestein because he didn't zone out during his speech. The king reminds Livestein of the raid force's lives on his shoulders and sets high expectations, to which Livestein vows to make him proud. A dark outline of something is visible flying above the clouds in the clear blue sky. The flying object is a carriage, held aloft by two flying creatures. Inside the carriage, Livestein sits across from a lady who confirms if he truly received full rights to lead the dungeon raid. Livestein points out the warrant for Paymore might be useless, but the lady says it's enough for Paymore to know his arrest warrant is out. Livestein becomes silent as the lady watches out the window. It's been a month since the black disaster descended upon Riez. It caused a lot of unrest in the upper echelons of the empire, with blames being thrown around, and since then, many things have changed. The creatures come to a stop and land the carriage in front of a huge building. The lady reminds Livestein of a meeting in 2 hours and asks what if he's late, to which Livestein tells her to wait until he arrives. Livestein asks about someone, and the lady says that someone should be inside. Livestein walks to the door and, announcing his arrival, flings the doors open. A girl, busy eating donuts, turns around at the sound of the doors opening. Livestein smiles and asks the girl if she rested well, calling her Wu Historia, receiving a wide giggle from her. Meanwhile, 3 people are making their way along a dark passageway, planning to retreat at the sign of a monster. The captain tells the 2 to keep their guard up, noting they're in Primordial Core, and says they'll reach the first room soon. With a concerned look, he hopes that the information they received is accurate. A little ahead, the captain confirms the information was true, noting the monster hasn't appeared since the Hishitalt raid force went there. He looks around, believing there will be something they can take out, while the other man exclaims they will be rich. And so, the 3 of them move into the second room and then to the third room. However, they find nothing of value. The man with long hair questions if the information has spread, fearing other forces may have already swept the place for valuable items. They begin doubting whether they are in Primordial Core. The captain points ahead and says in the 5th room, an ancient plant monster called Anthropophago lies. He explains that it's a plant-type monster whose body can be turned into a hard ore and be sold for a lot. He believes if they can take the ore back, they will break even. The other 2 express concern about whether the 5th room might be empty or if there are more monsters inside. The captain asks the 2 if they plan on leaving empty-handed, and he makes it clear anyone who is afraid can leave. The 3 of them proceed further, entering the 5th room to find lots of vine-like plants spread all over the floor. The captain pulls out a blade and suggests they gather the plant and leave quickly. Suddenly, the captain notices something reflecting in his blade, and he begins to sweat in fear. The man under the hood asks the captain to repeat what he said. At that moment, the captain bellows to run away as Lord Swallow's huge open mouth tries to swallow him. However, none of the 3 manage to escape and get eaten. Patrick inspects the intruder's equipment and remarks there's nothing valuable, while Renee suggests they could have returned alive if they weren't so greedy. And with a loathing face, she mutters that she really hates humans. Patrick asks Swallow what he thinks, and Swallow claims those humans tasted better than the undead. Patrick explains the intruders weren't part of the Empire. Their coat of arms suggests they're from the West Crantle Kingdom. Renee checks the symbol and remarks that those guys did come a long way. Swallow, meanwhile, comments that it's like a local specialty being delivered to the front door. Based on this raid, Patrick realizes they can't delay reinforcing the dungeon, as rumors of it being void of monsters are spreading fast. But seeing Swallow's indifference, Patrick asks how he can be careless when it concerns his own dungeon. Patrick sternly threatens to bring his resignation letter and tells Swallow to come down, who agrees reluctantly. Patrick turns to Adjura and expresses relief that they have her with them. He credits Adjura's detection magic for alerting them to the intruders, causing her to blush. Swallow also agrees that Adjura is reliable, causing Renee to get jealous. Renee claims that she can also use magic, and Swallow praises her too. Adjura says she is glad she could be of help. Patrick points out that Adjura has saved them a lot of trouble. Adjura then asks how long she will need to stay as a guest. Meanwhile, at this time, far away, a monster informs someone that preparations are done. The monster suggests they should head towards Judica, and the one the monster is speaking to is Lord Ubar. In the tranquil serenity of the night, Adjura sits atop a rocky outcropping, bathed in the ethereal moonlight. Adjura, despite being a demon king, laments her bleak future, as she lacks both money and a place to call home. She decides to make a decision soon since there will be a gathering for the demon kings in a couple of days. At that moment, Patrick arrives, finding the air more refreshing. Adjura asks Patrick if he is really out for some air, but Patrick points out that he is an undead. Patrick asks Asura why she's out, and she replies that she's there for some fresh air, then asks Patrick why he's out. Patrick explains that as he doesn't need sleep, he spends the time training. He points out that a swordsman's hand and sword, like his, rust if they aren't used. Patrick realizes it's his first time talking so casually to Asura like he is doing now. Clearing his throat nervously, he informs Asura that Mr. Tentacles is nearly recovered, Renee is waiting, and asks if she would like to go together. Seeing Mr. Tentacles, Asura says that he doesn't seem healed enough, and Patrick claims it's as good as it can get. Renee, who is on top of Mr. Tentacles, counts the total tentacles up to 68. Jumping down, Renee notes there's still a bit to go, with the recovery rate slow, predicting only 5 more tentacles will grow. Asura asks if Mr. Tentacles really fought the Hishitalt trade union. Patrick points out that Asura has her castle near Rie's and thinks it would be strange if she didn't know. Renee admits she would always know, as it was the raid force led by the greatest hero, Vern Hishitalt, that even killed her father. She wonders how powerful Mr. Tentacles must be for surviving a fight against such enemies. Moreover, Asura is certain if it were her, she would die like her father, and accepts her wish to stay in Primordial Core was just a dream. As Mr. Tentacles is almost recovered, Asura thinks she should convince Swallow to recruit more monsters. Renee suggests they should only recruit males, like the golem from the 4th room. Asura addresses Patrick and Renee, gathering their attention. She says it will be best if she leaves for Jadika. Meanwhile, back in Rie's, someone asks Wooen how her wounds are. When Wooen responds she is fine, Livestein suggests Wooen pretend like her wounds are still recovering. Livestein asks Wooen if she wants tea, but Wooen says she will get ready for the meeting. Hearing this, Livestein remembers the meeting and asks Wooen if the maid arrived, but Wooen isn't sure since she was out. Livestein then asks Wooen to head to the meeting room first, claiming he needs to take care of some papers. Heeding the orders, Wooen leaves the room, telling Livestein to come quickly. Once Livestein is alone, he asks someone if they know about the maids who clean the tea set. From the darkness, a face with glowing eyes says he will find out as soon as possible. Livestein points out that with thousands of confidential files in the office, someone cleaning the tea set without permission implies they look through the files. Livestein orders that stranger to find the maids and get rid of them in exactly 4 days. After a while, the meeting starts, and around a circular table, many members sit discussing the Black Disaster and Lord Swallow. The leader informs that the royal courts have announced that the Black Disaster is not Swallow and asks if anyone disputes this. Livestein counters, suggesting the announcement was to reassure citizens, prompting leader Cardi to ask if he has any proof linking the Black Disaster to Swallow. Livestein claims he saw it himself, Swallow fighting with hero Wooen, resulting in Garrote losing an arm. A man suddenly stands up in anger, accusing Livestein of lying, and Livestein responds that the evidence is right there. The leader looks over at Wooen and admits Livestein might be true. Livestein points out that Swallow appeared without any warning and suggests they should prepare as Swallow might return any time. The members there ponder this suggestion as someone asks how they can stop Swallow. One of them says that there were no faults in Rie's defenses earlier, so that means everything will be useless against Swallow. Livestein agrees with Duke Polthos's concern as he reminds them of the need for the 36th masterpiece. It turns out that everyone is looking for the 36th masterpiece, but they haven't been able to find it. Moreover, there aren't such strong individuals who can put up a fight against Swallow. Excluding Wooen, the other humans are all fragile, and no matter how much they train, they are sure they can't even scratch Swallow. To overcome this problem, Livestein feels like the 36th masterpiece is a must, but he is concerned as nobody is able to find it. Livestein mentions that the Pope's movements have been strange lately, as he has spread the rumors that Swallow was God's punishment. A woman stands up, dismissing it as nonsense, while Livestein argues it's not surprising given the Empire's religious suppression. Hearing this, that woman's veins pop in her temple as she warns Livestein to watch his mouth. But Livestein smirks, which enrages the woman, who bellows out, asking if it sounds like a joke. The woman grabs onto Livestein's collar while Livestein repeats he is just stating the truth. Suddenly, a masked man points a sword at the woman's throat, telling her she's overestimating her own power. Livestein swipes his hand and says he isn't taking the issue lightly as the masked man disappears. Livestein explains that if they leave the issue alone, the Empire will split into 2. Moreover, the Pope faction is holding 3 of the 36 masterpieces, calling them holy relics. Livestein realizes that to take those masterpieces back, a great holy war will be needed. Back in the core of the Ancient, Patrick has informed Swallow of something which he isn't taking seriously. This angers Patrick, who hisses and bellows at Swallow, informing him that Asura has left. Patrick repeats to Swallow that Lady Adjura has left, and Swallow dismisses it as unimportant, saying he heard it the first time. Seeing Swallow take this information lightly, Patrick shouts at him to listen properly and think before speaking. Swallow covers his ears in irritation, saying Adjura went to Judika for the Demon King's ball, so there's no need to fuss. Patrick grabs Swallow's paw, pulls it away from his ear, and shouts again that it will be a problem if Adjura doesn't return. Swallow points out that Adjura didn't say she would not return, and Patrick, pondering, admits Swallow is correct. Patrick says that even before leaving, Adjura was acting strange. He also mentions that Adjura hadn't said, "I'll be back." Renee claims that she too felt Adjura's behavior was strange and thinks Adjura might be planning to start her own force again. Swallow asks Renee what she just brought. Renee, smiling, reveals that it's a stew she prepared. Patrick jokingly says the stew will taste bad, causing Renee to give him a smack across his face. Swallow dismisses Adjura leaving as insufficient reason for their gathering and asks the two if they have anything else to say. Patrick explains that they can't delay in replenishing the monsters in the dungeon any longer. Swallow, looking irritated, complains that everything is getting pushed onto him. He lies down, refusing to move and reminding the two that as his guardians, they're supposed to handle their boss's tasks. Patrick admits that Swallow is correct, but states it won't work. He then reminds Swallow he has to take care of the aftermath in Harston, so claims he will be busy. Swallow asks Patrick who else will do the task if not him, and Patrick points to Renee. Renee, looking pleased, assures Swallow not to worry and leave it all to her. Meanwhile, Swallow worries, noting Renee's eye condition could arouse suspicion. Patrick tells Swallow he can rest and leave all the problems to Renee. Swallow realizes he will have to do it now as Patrick suggests maybe they can get Adjura. The old man driving the carriage informs Adjura they've arrived and bids her to take care of herself as she exits. Adjura looks ahead and is surprised that she actually came to the mercenary city, Nihit. As she moves along the streets, she notices everyone there looks dangerous. The city is located between two powerhouses and it's not affiliated with any force. 1 in 4 people in the city are involved in dungeon raids, making it the hub for dungeon information. In this unfamiliar and mapless place, Adjura decides to navigate by the stars to find her way to Judika. She looks around and sees a building as big as the Demon King's castle. She also senses the place is filled with defense mana as well as strong guards. Looking at the front door, Adjura sees a guard stop a man and allow him to go inside after checking something. Adjura thinks it won't be easy to gather info when suddenly, from an alley, she sees dark mana. Alarmed by it, she follows it. She then comes across some monsters locked up in cages. Adjura closes her nose due to the bad smell as she wonders if the monsters have been captured. The air is full of screeching, screaming, and growling sounds of the monsters. At that moment, someone appears behind Adjura, and she turns around. A huge man expresses surprise seeing Adjura there and asks why she is there. Adjura remains silent and keeps staring at that man while a dog-like monster behind the cage whimpers.